Ben McCarthy didn't set out to create a media company focused on Salesforce. He just began blogging about his use of the product as a way to document the various use cases he encountered. As it turned out, there were thousands of other people who were encountering those same use cases, and via Google searches they began landing on Ben's blog posts. Fast forward 10 years, and he now runs a 20-person media company that generates over 1 million page views per month and is the most authoritative resource for Salesforce customers. In our interview, we discuss why there's such a huge audience for Salesforce content, how he monetizes with webinars and white papers, and whether he wants to launch more media outlets centered around other cloud technologies. Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. Before we jump into the interview, I want to talk about how I monetize this show. As you've probably noticed, it doesn't carry any advertising. Instead, it relies entirely on paid subscriptions. A subscription gets you 3 main benefits. First, it allows you to book a half-hour introductory call with me. It's a great way to pick my brain about challenges you're facing in your own content business. Second, you're able to submit questions to my monthly Q&A series, and I'll answer them on this very show. And finally, a subscription gets you access to premium podcast episodes where I go even deeper on how the world's most successful media entrepreneurs grow their content businesses. Once you subscribe, you're given a custom feed that you can plug into your podcast player of choice. Subscribe at simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com. Or just Google the words Simon Owens and newsletter. Okay, let's jump into my interview with Ben. Hey, Ben, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with talking about Salesforce as a company and your history with it. I guess probably most of my listeners know what Salesforce is, but basically, in a nutshell, it's this very large enterprise SaaS technology that is typically labeled like a CRM, customer resource management, and it helps small and huge companies basically manage all the various contacts that they have with their customers in a single database. How did you first become acquainted with the platform?
So I first came acquainted with the platform when I landed a graduate job. So I just finished studying information systems in Cardiff in Wales and got a job as an IT consultant. I was telling all my friends and family I was going to be an IT consultant, and I hadn't a clue what I was going to be consulting on until the first day I joined, and it was Salesforce.
They didn't tell you, they didn't say where their need was at all?
No, it was at some random consultancy that didn't pay me very much, so I left after a few months. But they did train me up on Salesforce, which was nice of them. So yeah, and I was hooked. As somebody who doesn't come from a coding background, Salesforce is to a large extent clicks, not code. So you can click around it, you can customize, build fields, build workflows, automation. And as someone, who doesn't come from a coding background but does know IT quite well, it just fit perfectly with me. It was quite empowering to be able to build all this custom stuff, but not with code.
And when you say a Salesforce consultant, that kind of, there's this entire industry around Salesforce. Like, what does a Salesforce consultant do, and how is it related to this entire ecosystem of professionals who don't necessarily work for Salesforce, but they have businesses that are kind of circling around Salesforce?
Yeah, sure. So of course you got Salesforce, which is often referred to as the mothership in the Salesforce ecosystem, and then you have kind of 3 sets of companies around Salesforce. So one, you have consultancies, as you've just said. So consultancies will be anywhere from a freelancer up to Accenture, and they will implement Salesforce products when customers buy them. So for example, Salesforce have a huge partner program. And whenever they sell a deal, they want a partner to be attached with it because they don't want the customer going and attempting to implement their products themselves because it won't go very well and they'll churn as a customer. So they've got consultants with all these different specializations, CRM being one of them, marketing being another, service, commerce, all these kinds of different specializations. And they will be implementing the products and then often maintaining it afterwards as well.
Yeah, it's not just it's just not an out of the box type of product. There's especially the larger your organization is, there's so many intricacies of customization that you have to do to your particular business in order to get Salesforce optimized to work with your particular business, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Let's say you're a media business and you buy Salesforce Sales Cloud, which is for helping selling. Out of the box, it's just not customized for any industry, any processes whatsoever. So you really need a consultant to come in, understand how you work, what's your lead process, what's your quoting process, how do you send that statement of works, all that kind of stuff, and then you build custom processes on
Yeah,
top.
and so you said there are Salesforce consultants. What are the two other kind of areas of specialization around Salesforce that you mentioned?
So, I mean, the biggest one is being a Salesforce customer. So, if you're, Coca Cola, one of the biggest Salesforce customers in the world, they will have a team of, I would imagine, hundreds of people running their hundreds of Salesforce professionals running their Salesforce org. So these would be admins, developers, architects, loads and loads of different specialist roles, testers, all those kinds of things. So that's like the biggest group of people in the ecosystem. And then the last one is ISVs, or independent software vendors. So Salesforce has something called the App Exchange, which is very similar to the App Store on your iPhone. You can install apps into Salesforce, document generation or quoting or email integration. And then yeah, these apps are kind of big business. You could get a one man band doing an app, but some of these apps have been sold for close to a billion, valued over a billion, hundreds of millions in revenue. So yeah, it's a big economy built around Salesforce.
Yeah, because Salesforce has APIs, so it's easy to build either apps that are specifically around enhancing Salesforce, or there are probably just a lot of products that just need Salesforce integration. Like if you have like a email service provider or something like that, you want it to like hook directly into Salesforce system so that any contacts that are coming are basically, if someone signs up for your newsletter or something, it's being logged somewhere in Salesforce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you've got loads of apps which are actually built natively on Salesforce, so they're not needing APIs or integrates anywhere. But for example, HubSpot, I've worked with HubSpot, who are a competitor of Salesforce, but they have a fantastic integration into Salesforce. So if you are using Sales Cloud but HubSpot marketing, you can sync them nicely up.
And because it's a cloud technology, I had another person like you who's running a media company that's based around their company was based around Microsoft and its Teams ecosystem. But kind of the thing you talked about is because it's a cloud technology. It used to be if the technology was just hosted on your own servers, you would get like an update like occasionally, maybe once a year. But because it's a cloud technology, it's constantly changing and being updated. So there's this need now, in a cloud put a cloud technology world where there are constant updates and there's a lot more information needed because the ecosystem is changing a lot more quickly than it would have been changing like 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Salesforce do 3 releases a year for their core platform, and in each one of these releases, there's a absolutely insane amount of changes to the platform. Obviously, you won't need to know about all of them, depending on which parts you use, but you do need to be aware of the changes. And it's not just the releases that Salesforce is doing for free, but they also release a huge amount of products each year. Small ones, big ones. They acquire companies, all this kind of stuff. And again, you don't need to know about everything to do your job, but it's a good idea to know about it, which is kind of why we've been able to build this company, because there are so many updates in the ecosystem that someone needs to report on, and professionals in the ecosystem really need to be aware about.
Yeah, and it's not just updates to Salesforce, but then all those other companies we were talking about that are integrated with
Yeah.
Salesforce. So there's just tons of news, tons of new updates that are just happening constantly. So that kind of leads into Salesforce Ben, which is the media company that you ended up launching. So just to give a time frame, like got started with Salesforce in like 2012 or so. That's when you got hired as an IT
Yeah.
consultant. And you're working a few years. You're getting to know the Salesforce ecosystem. You're completely, hooked and fascinated by it. How and when did you start coming up with the idea for launching Salesforce Ben?
So I think the idea actually was what one of my colleagues, when I worked as a Salesforce admin, made this image, photoshopped my face on Superman and changed the Superman S to the Salesforce logo, and called it Salesforce Boy. And I was thinking of a URL for my LinkedIn. It was just when LinkedIn released the custom URLs, and I was like, oh, she's not Salesforce Boy, but Salesforce Ben. And then I just kind of there weren't that many resources around at the time. There were blogs on Salesforce, but people didn't keep them updated that much. It was very much, just blogging about their own very casual experiences. Like blogging used to be like a diary entry. And I created the site and I did it very similar. Because there wasn't a lot of documentation around. If I had to work out solutions for common problems, but they weren't documented anywhere, I just had to work them out. So what I would do is I would write blogs about it and and put them out on LinkedIn and things like that. But I guess then I started evolving to write more kind of BuzzFeed articles, 10 features you need to know about, or, the biggest acquisition Salesforce have done. So I started off writing about kind of technical solutions, but then quickly kind of tried to produce articles which are a little bit more interesting, and I guess you could call them clickbaity. I know the content was good, so it wasn't clickbait, but maybe the titles were.
And when you say documentation, I guess one thing that people who don't use this technology doesn't know is that it has like a million different use cases, and a lot of those use cases, a lot of people, because they're using the same technology, are wondering how to implement the same use cases. So they're like, I don't know what a good example is, but like they're going to Google and being like, how to do this on Salesforce, and I'm sure that they have their own kind of documentation of different use cases for on the Salesforce website, but there were just so many different uses with so many different technologies that probably Salesforce can't do this themselves. So you can actually drive a ton of Google traffic by documenting different ways to use the tool in all kinds of ways, because there were so many other people who are searching for those exact same use cases for the app, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I can remember one of the first articles I wrote was about a feature called recurring milestones in Service Cloud, and there was documentation on it. It would show you, the key parts of this feature, what they did, stuff like that. But there wasn't an implementation guide. So because I ended up having to interpret this very kind of bare bones documentation and then work out from that how to implement it, I wrote up my experience on actually how to implement it, not just what the features are. So, and Salesforce are so huge now. They're putting out, it's probably about 600 editions in every release, and that's 3 times a year, so nearly 2,000. So you can't really blame them for not having seriously detailed documentation for absolutely everything. They do have documentation for most things, but it's not these in-depth implementation guides that someone kind of, it's helpful to have if you're trying to implement this feature or product.
And so because you were creating this specialized niche content that you didn't really have a lot of competition for and that a lot of people were searching for in aggregate, you were able to build up search authority probably much quicker than someone who was writing in a vertical that was a more kind of general consumer vertical, because they're just like, it's so much easier to compete when you're writing about this kind of super niche content, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've never kind of blogged or written in the B2C space, but yeah, it's definitely competitive still. There were blogs in 2014, and there have been blogs. I mean, there's loads of blogs now, throughout my 10 years doing this, but I just think it's the consistency. You just have to be consistent week after week, month after month, year after year to build something. And I guess you ultimately have to be passionate about it as well. A lot of people probably start blogs and then it gets a bit too much effort. So they just kind of fade out from doing it. But it was something that I genuinely really enjoyed, getting messages from people, sending me an article going, oh, thanks so much for this. It was really helpful. So, yeah, that's kind of why it's going 10 years later.
And so you start with documentation. You said you got into like more kind of BuzzFeed listicle type things about different ways to use the platform. Why did you start branching out into that other kind of content?
I can't really remember. I think I like to read a lot on the internet. So I think I was seeing these kind of styles of posts out there on other media sites and going, why not for Salesforce? Because the thing is with the Salesforce community, and this is a really important point, because I think if I happened to land in Microsoft in my first job, I wouldn't have been able to create a similar thing. And it's because the Salesforce community are ridiculously passionate about their jobs. Like if you type in the word Salesforce community cult into Google, a lot of stuff will come up about how much of a cult it is, because it's kind of not normal for these IT professionals to be so bought into this enterprise software company. But the reason that people are is because Salesforce has given them a job, a very well-paid job, and the kind of attitude is that they like to send the elevator back down. Help people who are just starting their careers so they can kind of have a similar path to them because they've been so lucky to be given to kind of get this career path which doesn't require coding. So I think that's part of the reason we were able to get so much success with it, because people love to kind of advance their career more. So if you were able to mix this kind of fun sort of content, listicles, BuzzFeedy type articles with actually educational, informative Salesforce content, I think that's why it's caught on, because it's not dry, boring stuff about Salesforce. It's just got a little bit of a fun spin on it.
And how quickly did you ramp up an audience? Like, you started on with like LinkedIn and some light blogging. You created this dedicated URL for Salesforce Ben. Like, when did you start noticing like, wow, there's like a real audience here that's looking for this stuff?
So we actually rebranded recently, and I was looking. I did a little video, and I was reflecting on kind of the 10-year history, and we got 22,000 people in the first kind of 8 months of the site being live. But then I think it was pretty exponential after that. I mean, now we're at about 400,000 users a month and 1 million page views. But it did ramp up. It's been growing every year since, over those past 10 years. Some years were kind of 100% growth, 50% growth. Now we're down to kind of a bit less than that. But yeah, it did ramp up very quickly, and it was all from Google. It was all from organic. Back when it was just me doing this a few hours a week, I did have social pages, but they were like, I had this tool called Meet Edgar, which was very helpful at the time, but all it did is take my library of posts and just randomly dish them out on social media platforms. So not very targeted, but yeah, it was and still is the majority of traffic coming from Google.
And most of this time you were continuing to work for a cloud consulting, maybe a Salesforce consulting company. I think I was reading on your LinkedIn that you founded the London office. What kind of synergies did that was like the Salesforce Ben affecting your ability to get clients, or what kind of synergies were there between your day job and what you were doing on the Salesforce Ben side?
Yeah, so I mean, for a start, like as my career, so I worked as a Salesforce admin at end user. Then worked for ISV, one of these app companies. I then co-founded this consultancy. So they were three very, very different roles, and it was great really for the evolution of the site, because it gave me something else to write about. I could write about my previous job, but then I could also write about this new job and kind of new things that came out of it. So that was quite exciting. But I suppose from a personal branding point of view, when I was in my second job at that app company, I was personally starting to get quite well known. So it did help quite a lot. It helped my company when I was at trade shows and stuff, because people would come over to the stand, see me, things like that. But it really, really helped with the consultancy, because I joined as a consultant, but I got promoted to managing director, which wasn't much of a promotion, because like the managing director just left, and then we were an office of 3 people, so I just kind of got promoted by default. But I was selling a lot. I was working with Salesforce to sell into these new clients, and these clients sometimes had Salesforce, sometimes they didn't. But if they did have Salesforce, they would have probably heard of me and my blog. So there was just like instant trust built, So which I think is one of the amazing things about having a personal brand, is people just trust you because they know what you do online. So yeah, it was very very kind of mutually beneficial for me, like writing on the blog, but also my personal brand helping with my day job as well.
So you think that there were cases where a client would choose your company over a competing consultant because of your personal brand and because they trusted you more, probably?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone ever said that. And of course, like, I consider myself quite a good IT professional. So it could have been good at that, could have been personal brand. But I would say in some cases, people probably picked us over someone else because of the personal brand. Yeah.
And I used to do content marketing for a CRM consulting company, and I don't know if yours is the same, but just landing one client, that was like 6 figures in revenue, right? Because they pay, I think like the company that I did the content marketing for, their average customer paid them $200,000 for a Microsoft CRM implementation. Is that kind of in the ballpark of what your company was charging?
So we were SMB. So I would say our average, it started quite low, but I'd say it climbed to about 50 to 100 average. But we were a small consultancy. So bigger consultancies would definitely be an average of 200, if not, into the millions.
So just, I mean, the reason I'm bringing that up is just shows the value of what you were doing. That if you could bring in a few clients, then that would have been, multiple six figures in revenue just because of how valuable you were as a personal brand. How did you start monetizing Salesforce, Ben, directly?
So the first time we ever monetized it was we used to have practice. So Salesforce certifications are quite a big deal. Everyone has them. And I had free mock exams on the site. And I started selling downloadable PDFs so you could take the questions offline. And I charged $5 for it. So that was like the first thing that we did. And then it was into advertising, really. In the early days, I think we probably started monetizing it 2017, so maybe 4 years after I founded it with it. And it was just display and email advertising. And then, and then a few of those kind of PDF style things. That was the initial monetization. Anyway.
And who were the advertisers?
So pretty much like 100% of people who have ever advertised on the site are Salesforce ISVs, so these Salesforce App Exchange companies. And the reason that is because their only market is from the majority of them, their only market is Salesforce customers, and there's no database online that you can buy a list of Salesforce customers. It's very hard to reach them. The only real place to reach them is at physical events, which are a big deal in the Salesforce world. So I think when we popped up, it was almost like a brand new channel. People kind of use Google Ads, of course, LinkedIn ads, stuff like that. But I think the fact that we had a 100% core audience of Salesforce professionals meant that it was quite attractive to them. And we still work with, many, many ISVs up until this.
Hey, I just want to interrupt the programming for just a moment to note that you are at the halfway point of the video. If you made it this far, then that's probably a sign that you like this sort of content. So maybe just take a second to subscribe to the channel below. If you're feeling especially generous, you can hit the like button. Okay, back to the show. So because you had Salesforce users as your readers who want to be smarter about how to use the platform, these app companies who want to be like, they want to reach the person who at a company who buys or procures Salesforce products and other IT and stuff like that, and they want that audience to then implement their app or company into their Salesforce. So it was like a perfectly targeted audience.
Yeah.
And you said it was, to begin with, it was just display ads and newsletters. Obviously, a lot of companies or media companies in your space, they monetize lead generation. Did you start getting into that eventually, like webinars and stuff like that, where they would turn over like email addresses and other kind of information to the advertiser?
So we started doing webinars, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and they were very much lead generation. We also do LinkedIn Lives now, which are quite interesting because they don't generate leads, but usually we drop like CTAs in the comments so that if people are interested in learning more about the app, they can go via there. But the webinars have been really successful, and I think the reason they're really successful is because obviously we have a promotional channel that we can use to get all the exact audience that the ISV is interested in, but also we're kind of the like Salesforce market authority on content, I would say. We've been doing it for longer than anyone, so quite a big part of what we feel we contribute to these Salesforce ISVs doing a webinar with us is input on the topic, on the title, what the ecosystem is currently interested in. Because it changes all the time. AI has obviously been a big one. DevOps a couple of years ago was a huge one. And these kind of trends are changing all the time. And we know, backup is not such a trendy topic, let's say. Data isn't such a trendy topic. So we can kind of input on where they should focus their content to get the most amount of audience for a particular segment that they're interested in.
Have you teamed up with advertisers on like white papers and stuff? I know that's another form of lead generation advertising that brands like.
Yeah, so we produce ebooks with ISVs as well, which have been really good. I'm trying to think of a few other ways. We're doing we are yeah we're thinking of a few other ways at the moment. They're kind of in the works, but something that we've just done actually is we've gone quite heavy into video last year. We hired three people on the team to focus on video. And we've actually just got our own studio as well. So we're going to be working with a lot of content, thought leadership content for ourselves, go on our YouTube channel, possibly a podcast, LinkedIn Live streaming from there. But also it's the opportunity to provide our sponsors with like a place where they can record content, whether that's with us or not. And I think because like influencer marketing and content marketing is obviously getting so popular now, and video content marketing in particular, I think is becoming a lot more popular. We're kind of going to have the platform for them to work with us and stuff like that.
And LinkedIn Live is like LinkedIn's audio only type service, kind of like Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse.
No, that's so LinkedIn. They do have a LinkedIn Live audio only, which I only just saw the option for the other day. But the ones we've been running for the past year or so are video, basically webinars. But you don't need to register your details. You just click attend, and then it notifies you when we're live. It also, because we've got 90,000 followers on LinkedIn, it also notifies everyone when we actually go live, even if they're not registered. So it encourages kind of people to come on demand.
And is the benefit of that, because obviously there's a trade-off, is that you don't get the personal information of everybody who's attending, but is it that because LinkedIn is so huge, you'll get more attendance to the LinkedIn Live than you would from a normal webinar?
Yes, we tend to. I think just because it doesn't require people to go off to a Zoom page, sign up with their details, they can literally just click register, and it's most people on the Salesforce system are on LinkedIn like daily, I think, so it's quite easy for them to just register. But yeah, we see like I want to say like 4 or 5 times the amount of attendees on the LinkedIn Live than the webinar. It's like we see like 100 to 200 plus people. We've seen upwards of 700 people on a LinkedIn Live. But a webinar would tend to get like 200 to 300 signups, but with like a 25%, 30% attendee rate. So it's, you get like 50 people on the thing. So it is good, obviously, because you get people's details. But yeah, LinkedIn Live, I think if you pick a really good topic, it can reach a huge amount of people.
And what have you done to kind of to diversify your audience base, or create a more direct connection with your audience? Because obviously Google traffic is great, but like actually owning your audience and being able to reach them directly is obviously superior. What, like, have you been invested in newsletters, social media? Like, what are the ways that you kind of have strengthened your brand and diversified away from Google?
Yeah, so email newsletter we've been doing for like 8 years or something like that. Started on MailChimp, the free version, many, many years ago. And we've just revamped it with the rebrand, actually. And we're trying to make it, I would say before it was kind of all about us. It was about our blog posts, our new stuff we've put out. But now we're trying to make it a bit more about the ecosystem instead. So we're trying to, for example, highlight Salesforce events going on that aren't anything to do with us, or other blog posts from other influencers that might be interesting, or Salesforce in the news, linking out to whoever, TechCrunch, VentureBeat, even if it's not our content. Because our general goal is to create a newsletter that is invaluable for anyone in the ecosystem. Like, they need to subscribe to it to stay up to date, really. So we wanted to make it, we've started to make it a bit less about us. Still includes all our new content, but about kind of things going on in the ecosystem as well. In terms of social, so we do have Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Facebook have actually deactivated our account and not told us why, but we weren't getting much traffic from there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Twitter's been pretty good, but we're starting to see the traction drop off. Instagram's okay. LinkedIn by far has been the best network for us. We get about 80% of our social traffic from LinkedIn, and we're now starting. We realized about a year ago that our feed was quite boring. It was just post after post after post after post. So we're really putting an effort now to create varied content. So, infographics, carousels, video clips, memes, all this kind of stuff. And it's really working because we've got a good idea for what our audience likes. And it does help you connect with people better. People are always commenting quite a lot on our posts. So yeah, that's been really successful for us.
And how has the rise of generative AI affected your Google traffic? Because I've been reading reports that the sites that have been hit hardest are the ones like yours that focus on documentation. A lot of like tech forum, like coding forums and stuff like that, have seen really steep declines because those kind of technical questions, people programmers are now just plugging into ChatGPT or Google Bard or whatever. How has that impacted you?
So not too much actually, and I think it's because we do have kind of developer snippets and stuff like that, but we're not a coding blog really. It's it's the minority of our content, and I think from what we've seen, I mean, generative AI is definitely a concern that we're looking into, but I think for now, and especially because of the kind of September 2021 cutoff date, I don't know if that's still the case, but I know it used to be. Obviously, ChatGPT was very out of date with Salesforce, and a lot of the outputs would be incorrect. So I don't know how many people are using like generative AI tools as the verbatim answer to things. I think they would still go off and research it. So currently, it hasn't impacted us too much, but it is a concern for the future, obviously. Um, so yeah, we have ongoing talks internally about how we're going to deal with that.
So when I visited the homepage for your site, I noticed a lot of different bylines. I didn't see your byline at all. How have you focused on expansion in terms of hiring and everything like that? And when did it stop being just you and suddenly building an entire staff of people?
So yeah, so we've got 20 people hired now. So I was running it up until 2020 is when we hired our first employee, who was my girlfriend at the time, now fiance uh, slash business partner now. So she's been in the sale. I got her into the Salesforce ecosystem, and she joined full time in 2020, and then she took up a real kind of. She loves operations, which I'm not so good at. I'm the kind of creative one, and she's very very good at. I had loads of spreadsheets with which didn't make sense and were very confusing. So she actually bought Salesforce, operationalized all of our processes on Salesforce. So instead of like sales stages, it's content stages, in review, team review, that kind of thing. And she's done a great job over the past couple of years of essentially building out the whole team. So we hired a few kind of core roles. So we hired someone called Christine, who is a very well-known Salesforce individual who's technical. We then hired a mutual friend to act as our content delivery manager. So she's essentially making sure everything's going out, interacting with guest posters, making sure the kind of content calendar's full. And then after that, we had a few other kind of senior hires, but a lot of them have been graduates because we kind of feel like, graduates are the perfect kind of role to hire because they're very, very eager. And although Salesforce is quite difficult to teach, we've built kind of processes and onboarding to kind of get them up to speed, which is working quite well. So I would say about 75% of our hires, 75% of those, no, yeah, 75% of those 20 people are probably graduates.
And are most of the people working in editorial, or like what are the kind of different main roles at your company?
So we have a so we have a marketing manager with social media who has a social media person, a graphic designer, and also the person that does our events and webinars. We then got Lauren, our content delivery manager, who has, I think, about 4 or 5 people working in content. So we don't actually have any writers at the moment. So the writing is all done by kind of the technical people and guest writers we work with. But writers, we will be hiring full-time writers soon. But the content team is mainly made up of editors who are uploading the content, reading the content, making sure it's good enough to go out. We've then got, I mentioned that PDF that I used to sell for $5 of the mock exams. So we've actually created a whole business line out of that now, which is courses.salesforceben.com. So we produce our own courses. Some of them have got videos, practice exams, all that kind of thing. So that's got 4 or 5 people working for it in that division. So that generates a fair amount of revenue.
Is that a subscription business, or you're just selling the courses?
Just sell it, yeah. I think a kind of subscription business could be something we get into in the future, but for now it's just a buy, one-off courses you're buying. But some of them are for like skills such as learning development on the Salesforce platform, and but quite a lot of them are for certifications. So learn how to pass this certification, and here's some mock questions to make sure you're looking good for the exam.
And like, are you doing the sales in terms of finding the partners and stuff like that, or do you have like, are you doing active outbound sales, or is it all inbound?
So we have an account manager. So she's been with us. My sister actually, it's quite a family business, and my other sister works as our HR manager. So yeah, she was my other sister was working as a social media manager for many years, and then she's transitioned over to sales now. So she's doing a great job as a account manager. So it is mostly inbound at the moment. We do make an effort to do outbound if there's a particular company that we're not working with yet that we think we should be, but we are lucky enough to have the majority of it inbound. I think it's because really we do have some competitors, I suppose, but they're not really competitors. They're just other Salesforce bloggers out there. So yeah, but we are looking to hire a business development rep actually, so we can kind of be a bit more strategic with who we're reaching out to, because there's definitely a certain type of ISV/app company that works the best with us. Someone who's got a bit of a marketing team and can make sure they can generate good landing pages on their side, that kind of thing.
And when did you quit your job at the Salesforce at the consulting company?
So I actually quit that end of 2020, September 2020, and then I went to join a startup, which didn't go so well. And then at the same time, Salesforce Ben was kind of taking off, so I transitioned out of that startup and then came over to Salesforce Ben full time.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever contemplated launching a consulting arm of Salesforce Ben that would basically do the same thing, or is that just like too like not a super scalable business?
So yeah, I think I've personally had. I mean, I was in consulting for 4 years, and I think that was enough. It was a very very interesting job, but I think it would add a massive layer of complexity, like just running these huge, large scale projects. I've got a huge spreadsheet of kind of other business ideas that we can go out to, and I think kind of research, advisory, kind of consulting, that kind of side of things is really interesting, and I think we might do that. I kind of imagine we could create a advisory firm that goes in, tells customers what they might need, but don't deliver the services, and we're kind of completely unbiased because we're not going to be delivering the services.
So I heard this there's now like I think for Microsoft CRM there's an entire ecosystem of people who just manage the RFP process for the consultants. Like they're consultants that help you find the right implementation partner. So they get to help you choose who to consult with, but then they get to like walk away and not actually get bogged down in the actual consultancy itself, which is funny. And then
there's also people that charge a lot of money to negotiate with Salesforce or Microsoft on your behalf, so they know the prices that they can get. So you hire them, and they'll do all the negotiating for you.
Procurement specialist. I had another person on the podcast who ran something called the Art of Procurement, and so that's a whole other ecosystem of B2B consulting. You recently started doing live in-person events too, right?
Yes, kind of. Well, they're parties. So Salesforce have big conferences. The biggest being in San Francisco called Dreamforce, which is a complete spectacle. Like anyone listening to this and you haven't heard of it, I'd recommend you Google it. It's crazy. And a lot of partners will throw parties after the day is finished. That's a 3-day event. And that's a lead generation exercise, but also it's a lot of fun, So because we have this big network, we're able to throw a pretty good party. We're pretty good at that kind of stuff, and then we're good at driving people to the party as well. So we basically handle all of the organization and driving people to the party, and then ultimately the companies get the lead list. But we are looking to go into like more normal events.
Well, the theory behind that is like rather than you doing all the work of trying to lure a bunch of people to some random city that you choose, it's like, well, Salesforce is already doing the work of luring them all to a city, and while they're already there, they're going to need to do things at night, so we're going to provide like a basically an offshoot of event. Like you see this at South by Southwest a lot. You see this at CES, but it's a good way to it probably takes a little bit less overhead for you because you don't have to plan an entire conference and hope that people were willing to come from it. You already know the customers are going to be there. You just have to get them to come over to your party. So it's a little bit of an easier lift,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the key thing that we're still trying to work out is how to, because the Salesforce ISVs, the sponsors, they generate a huge amount of leads, but they're not necessarily warm because they haven't spoken to the vast majority of them. So there's kind of like, we're trying to work out a way where we can, the ISVs can engage with the attendees of the party a bit more. But then there's a question: do the attendees want to engage with a company? When it's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening. So yeah, but the party was good.
And looking ahead 5 to 10 years from now, where do you see opportunities for expansion? Like, do you want to stay 100% focused on Salesforce? Could you see, launching other, like, could you build a media empire of cloud technology type of sites that are focused on other cloud tech, whether it's, I don't know, MailChimp or HubSpot or Microsoft or different stuff like that? Like, where do you want to expand?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I have thought about creating kind of an umbrella brand, parent brand, I guess, and then we could have ServiceNow Ben, or I probably wouldn't call it that, but HubSpot Ben, or things like that. Very, very possible. If I mean, I'm probably giving away a big gap in the market now, but if you Google other blogs similar to us in other ecosystems, I don't think they really exist. There's not one for, and it might be because the communities aren't as passionate like they are in Salesforce. There might be a good reason for that, but I would, ServiceNow is a huge company. HubSpot's getting bigger and bigger, so I think there could be a gap in the market there. But I think it would require a huge amount of resources to do that. So maybe in 5 years time when we're much bigger. But I think for now we really want to double down on Salesforce because there's so many, with this AI wave coming out, we've been writing a lot about AI, and not just Salesforce AI, but how ChatGPT and OpenAI intersect with Salesforce and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of adjacent technologies we can write about on the current blog with the current brand because our community is interested in those topics.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, Ben, well, those were all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you online?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or salesforceben.com.
All right. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Great. Cheers, Simon.